Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji's, Mataji's, welcome you all to today's discussion on Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13. So maybe we start with a bit of a revision. Okay, so any devotees would like to volunteer to revise any of the points that you recollect from the last time? Hare Krishna. So we started our discussion last time by explaining this particular section of Bhagavad Gita in brief, which talks about Jnana Yoga, and which we specifically mention what is the context of Krishna speaking about Jnana Yoga in the last section, in the third section of Bhagavad Gita. Anyone would like to revise any of the points with this as the start? Nikhil, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna,
Hare
Dandas
Krishna,
Prabhuji.
Prabhu. Dandavat
Hare
Pranam.
Krishna, Dandas Prabhuji. Any points you would like to recollect, Nikhil Prabhuji?
Prabhuji, last time you gave us a homework
Mm-hmm.
on the 5 stages of the,
Brahma
Brahma
Pucha.
Pucham Pratishtha. So I
Yes.
tried to read through it through the purport. It was, then I can, if you think it's worthwhile, I can share those points.
Sure, Prabhuji. No worries. So, that,
If-
yes, we'll come to. And what were Arjuna's inquiries in response to this? Krishna is giving these answers, like including the Brahma Pucha, what has been explained. What did Arjuna inquire Krishna about? What all
Okay.
asked? Yeah.
Yes. There were 6 questions basically
Mm-hmm.
that Arjuna was inquiring
Mm-hmm.
in the fields of activities and the knower of the field.
Yes, field. What is the field of activity? Who is the what is the kshetra? Kshetra means the field of activity. Who is the kshetragya, the knower of the field of activities? Then
The first question was, what's the, Prakriti? That's the material.
Prakriti, yeah, material nature. Yes,
And he talks about the Purusha, the enjoyer
Purusha.
of the matter.
Okay,
And like you were saying, Kshetra. Kshetra was the field in which one acts in the material world.
right.
And then the Kshetrajna, that is the entity which experiences the fields of actions.
Yeah, the knower of the field of actions. Yes.
Yes. And then comes the Gyan, which is the knowledge and the process of acquiring the knowledge, which was
Mhm.
explained in 13.3 and others. And then the Gayam, the
Object.
object of
Object.
knowledge.
Yeah, that we'll discuss today. The object of knowledge. Krishna's response to it. So out of this, thank you for all listing all these inquiries by Arjuna. So before we come to the home assignment part, in terms of, I won't necessarily ask all the details, but in terms of Purusha, who does Bhagavad Gita describe the Purusha as? Who is the Purusha? And maybe we'll request all the devotees to participate. Don't worry, even if the answer is not correct, don't feel embarrassed and all. We are all learning here, but it is very important that we put our efforts to revise, to put our intelligence to work in trying to understand Krishna and Krishna's teachings. So who does Lord Krishna or Bhagavad Gita describe the Purusha as? Who is
Krishna
mentioned?
himself, Krishna himself, Prabhuji, he is a
Krishna.
supreme enjoyer.
Krishna himself is the Purusha in the truest sense, he is supreme enjoyer. But before Krishna, who does Bhagavad Gita also describe Purusha as?
Jivatma.
The Jivatma, the conditioned soul. Why? Why does Bhagavad Gita describe Are we
Because
the
because he lords it over the material nature and he has got this enjoying propensity.
Yes, very nice, Anvaya Mataji. So in the conditioned state, living entity, the Jivatma, it has got the propensity to lord it over material nature and act as if it is the enjoyer, but it is in the ultimate sense not the enjoyer. Supreme Lord is the enjoyer. So very nice. So this is about the Purusha in terms of Kshetra, field of activities. What is the Kshetra? Body.
Our
Yes.
body.
Our
Yes,
body.
our body. And why it is called as Kshetra? Why is it Kshetra? Because it is basically a medium for the living entity to express its desires to act, right? And Kshetragya, who is the Kshetragya? Sudarshan Prabhu, Madan Mohan, Krishna, Leela Prabhu, Diti Mataji. Try. Who is the Kshetragya, the knower of the fields of activities? Who is mentioned?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, the
Hare
soul.
Krishna. The living entity, the soul, is mentioned as the knower of the field of activity. And who is the other Kshetragya that is mentioned again in the truest sense? So
The
we,
super soul.
sorry, come again.
The super soul.
Super soul. The localized form of Lord Krishna, super soul, is mentioned as the real knower of the field of activities. And we discussed how, as the knower of the field of activities, our knowledge is very limited. I gave the example, just like say few hours back, if we have had prasadam, we know overall on a high level the process of digestion, but we don't know to the minutest detail how each cell acting, or we even don't know fully the desires within our own heart. But Krishna, he is the exact knower in all the fields of activities, in everybody's heart, what is happening, what thoughts are coming, even before that person comes to know, Lord Krishna knows. And for that, we saw one specific example from the scriptures. What was that example? To describe Krishna's position as the real knower of the field of activity, as the real Kshetragya. What was that example that we saw last time? Very famous example from Mahabharata.
When Bhishma wanted to. Yes, please go ahead, Mataji. Become Mataji. Sorry.
Bhishma Dev wanted to kill the 5 Pandavas with 5 special arrows, and Krishna knew about it, and he asked Arjun to collect these arrows from Duryodhana in the evening.
Yes.
And later Bhishma Dev had to wanted Krishna to break his vow of never lifting a weapon in the battle.
Yes, so Bhishma immediately came to know that none other than Krishna would have known this specific thing, that Bhishma has specifically prepared and kept ready 5 special arrows for killing all the 5 Pandavas. So Bhishma took a vow that just like Krishna made me break my vow, I will fight so valiantly even without these 5 arrows to make sure that Krishna breaks his vow tomorrow by making Arjun come in severe trouble. So we discuss about Kshetra, Kshetragya. Then let's come to the home assignment. And maybe we first check who all of you got an opportunity to read that specific purport that was mentioned within the home assignment. Thank you, Nikhil Prabhu, Kirti Mataji, Anvaya Mataji. You got a
Yes.
chance? You got a
Yes,
chance.
Mataji.
Okay. Very
Yes,
nice.
Prabhuji.
So maybe we cover one devotee, one specific kosha or level of understanding that is mentioned in the purport, maybe along with an example or so that it is very clear. Otherwise, these details, they remain very theoretical. If we see the example, then it is very clear. So who wants to explain the first level of understanding? So Kirti Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, the first level of understanding Brahma Pucham that you mentioned is the Annamaya Kosha, wherein we try to see God in the food grains that we eat. So, for example, like before eating, few of them pray, very intensely pray to the farmers or everybody. So they're trying to see God within them, and they're trying to they're trying to understand, and they're trying to say that, okay, I'm very thankful to you. So that is the Annamaya Kosha, Prabhuji, the first part of it.
Right. So before we proceed for the Annamaya Kosh, can we think of any examples, Prabhuji's Matajis, to understand it better? Say, I'll give a very simple example. A small child, okay, a toddler, whatever object falls in the toddler's hand, what is the tendency of the toddler? A small child, it
They
tries
want to
to
eat it
eat. Yeah,
or
if
put it
you
in the mouth.
even if you give pen, pencil, or any object, the tendency, because why? The child's level of understanding or consciousness has only grown to a level which is still at a very preliminary, which means that the child is more concerned with fulfilling the hunger or fulfilling the appetite. So any object that comes within the hand of a child, it tries to put in its mouth and it fulfill that propensity of eating. Or other example we can see is that in general, all the animals, birds, species you can consider that, of course, they are mainly after fulfilling the necessities of body, including eating, sleeping, mating, defending. But first propensity is eating. That means they are constantly looking out for food. As soon as the birds get up early in the morning, they start chirping, and their main plan is, where do I get my food? Where do I get my food? So that is a very, very preliminary level of consciousness of a living being on the Annamaya Kosh. And the scriptures, they specifically want us to grow through these different koshas that are mentioned, of level of understanding, that to grow from just seeking out for food or fulfilling one's appetite from Annamaya to the Jnanamaya and subsequent. So first one we saw the Annamaya Kosh level of knowing the things, understanding the things. Next one, Nikhil Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. The next one is the Pranamaya.
Annamaya.
And
Yes,
because the first one, is more on the materialization of the Supreme, and then the Pranmaya, after realizing the Supreme Personality in food, one realizes the absolute truth in the living symptoms or the life forms.
yes. In
One
the
seeks
living,
to preserve his life. Yeah.
sorry, repeat that last statement, Prabhuji.
One seeks to preserve his life.
Yes. So if there is a choice between preserving one's life or just seeking out food, an intelligent person will always choose the first one. Like last time I had given example, uh, I don't know whether it was in this session or some other session, that whenever there are any special occasions, like say for example fasting, or say a person falls sick, he's not well, and somebody is having fever, and some other friend offers this sick person uh, oily food stuff, then if that person is intelligent enough, he would know that this particular food item in my current state of sickness, it is poison for me. Why? Because if I eat oily food stuff while the body is not well, while I am having fever, the condition will further degrade and I can get further sick. So if for some time, till the time I get back to my good health, I avoid these oily or spicy foodstuffs, that is best for my health. Or if we are following any fast for a special day, say for example Ekadashi, we would be able to restrain ourselves from consuming grains. So we have slightly come one level above the Annamaya Kosha by understanding that there are higher uses of intelligence than the level of food to achieve higher purpose of life, maybe to get back to good health or to gain spiritual credits. I restrain myself for that particular period of time from consuming the food grains. So this is one level higher. What is the next one? Who wants to? Diti Mataji, Hare Krishna. Please unmute.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Mataji.
The third stage is Jnanamaya or Manomaya. In this stage, a person starts focusing on the philosophical approach of his life, and where he starts thinking, and he also starts the feeling and willing, and he'll also get the mental speculations levels. Yes, Prabhuji. And this is the lowest level of realization as per Anamaya and Pranamaya, the Jnanamaya. These three are the lowest level of the consciousness and realization.
Yeah, so in terms of the hierarchy, it goes from Annamaya to Pranamaya, then to Jnanamaya.
Jnana.
Okay, so then after Jnanamaya, what is next? We will discuss Jnanamaya and Vijnanamaya together. Who can explain the fourth one, Vijnanamaya? Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, can I speak?
Yes, Anvaya Mataji.
Yeah.
Yes.
Vijnanamaya Kosh is where your intelligence is involved. Okay, the intellect is involved, and it is suggested like if we get a human form of life, we must at least be present in this kosha, where you get the power of discrimination.
Yes, that was the word I was waiting for. We have the power of discrimination at the level of Vijnanamaya Kosha. So, what does it mean? What is the difference between Jnanamaya and Vijnanamaya? So, Jnana means knowledge, and Vijnana means realized knowledge. So, I don't want to use the word theoretical, but Jnanamaya means one knows what is right and what is wrong. But just having that knowledge itself necessarily does not save a living entity. I'll give you an example. Like all of you would have seen the cigarette packets. On the cigarette packets, in a very graphic manner, always there is a very ghastly picture that is shown of either a child or a person having cancer, and it is written in bold letters that tobacco consumption is injurious to health. One may get cancer if one consumes tobacco, but no smoker ever gives any value to that caution, that warning. Why? Because they know for sure what is going to happen if I consume this product. It's very detrimental, but that knowledge is not necessarily realized. As a result, despite of putting this big warning on the packet, the tobacco consumption still, the graphs go higher and higher. So that is the difference between Jnanamay and Vijnanamay, having knowledge versus having realized knowledge. So in the stage of Vijnanamaya, using this realized knowledge, one is able to discriminate, one is able to act in terms of what is right and what is wrong. So that is Vijnanamaya Kosh. And what is the last one, Prabhuji's, Mataji's? Anyone would like to answer?
Anandamay Kosh.
What is, yes, Anandamaya Kosh. Yes, Mataji, can you explain a bit more?
Yes, Anandamay Kosh, it is at this stage you can experience bliss or uninterrupted bliss, and usually it is a stage at which the soul is connected to the super soul through the medium of a guru.
Yes. So Anandamaya stage, as the name suggests, it is the stage of complete bliss. And this stage is described in Bhagavad Gita at various levels, including in the 18th chapter, we see the description of the Brahma Bhuta person, the one who is situated on the platform of Brahma Bhuta, understanding of the Brahman. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kangshati sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labhate param. That such a person who is at the stage of complete realization, he is situated in complete bliss, total bliss in any condition of life. He doesn't lament when he loses a particular thing, or he na Brahmabhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kangshati, or he does not desire something which he is lacking or which he is having. So this is the topmost stage of Brahman realization. So these are 5 stages of gaining knowledge from the very preliminary stage of Annamaya Kosha, where we saw the example of a small child who is still developing in his level of understanding, knowledge, and animals. They come in that level, and we gradually saw one by one elevation from animal level consciousness to the consciousness of Brahmabhuta platform, the consciousness of the highest devotee situated at the highest level. Anyone has any question, comment, Prabhuji's, Mataji's, before we proceed? All right. So let me go back to the slides. Oops. So as part of today's discussion, Krishna, after talking about Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetra, Kshetragya, now and Jnana, now Krishna will speak about Jneyam. What is the object of knowledge? What is really worthy of knowing? And that later on Krishna will elaborate on that. But what would happen? What is the benefit of knowing these objects of knowledge? That also we will discuss as part of our discussion today. And I am very happy and relieved to see that devotees are opening up and are comfortable with these concepts, because this chapter is bit technical, to be honest, and we don't want to just understand it at the theoretical level. We will try and understand the concepts with the help of examples, then it is very clear. So let's hang on 1 second. Yeah, so we saw what is the connecting link between the last section and this. So this we have already covered. And what is the benefit of understanding the initial inquiries of Arjuna and Krishna's answer to those inquiries? By understanding the difference between the Kshetra, the body, soul and super soul, the Kshetragya, and by following the process of knowledge, the soul can transcend dualities and realize his eternal subordination to Lord Krishna and attain the supreme destination. By having the knowledge of the knower, Kshetragya, one can relish the nectar of life. There is one specific verse in which Krishna uses this word, Jnana Jnatvam Amrutam. One can relish the nectar of life if we understand this. So let us proceed. Let's recite this verse first. Please try to repeat. Neyam yattat pravakshami.
Niyam
Yattat
Pravakshammi
pravakshami. Yajñatvat amruta. Yajñatva amrutam ashnute.
Yajñatva
Jnatva
Amrutam
amrutam
Ashnute
ashnute
Anadim Anadimat param Brahma.
Anadimat
Anadimat
Param
param
Brahma
brahma
Nasattanashat uchate.
Na Sattanam
Nasat uchyate.
Bhajate.
Any devotee would like to read through the translation and purports? Prabhuji's, Mataji's?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, may I?
Yes, Madan Mohan Krishna Leela Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. I shall now explain the knowledge, knowing which you will taste the eternal Brahman, the spirit, beginless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this material world. Purport. The Lord has explained the field of activities and the knower of the field. He has also explained the process of knowing the knower of the field of activities. Now he began to explain the knowable, first the soul and the supersoul. By the knowledge of the owner, both the soul and the supersoul, one can release the nectar of life. As explained in the second chapter, the living entity is eternal. This is also confirmed here. There is no specific date at which the jiva was born, nor can anyone trace out the history of the Jivatma's manifestation from the Supreme Lord. Therefore, it is beginningless. The Vedic literature confirms this. Na gyante nariyate va vipassit. The knower of the body is never born and never dies, and he is full of knowledge. The Supreme Lord as the Super Soul is also stated in the Vedic literature to be Pradhana Kshetrajna Patir Guneshaha, the chief knower of the body and the master of the three modes of material nature. In the Smriti, it is said, Aso Bhakto Harer Eva Manashabhalo Kadachana. The living entity are eternal in the service of the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed by Lord Chaitanya in his teachings. Therefore, the description of Brahmana mentioned in this verse is relation to the individual soul, and when the word Brahmana is applied to the living entity, it is to be understood that he is Vijnana Brahma, as opposed to Ananda Brahma. Ananda Brahma is the supreme Brahmana personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, just like the Kshetrajna, where or Purusha, where we first talked about the soul, the Jivatma, followed by the supreme enjoyer, supreme knower of the field of activities, super soul. Here also, Krishna is describing Gneyam, the knowable or the object of knowledge. And within this object of knowledge, initially, the soul is being referred to as the Vijnana Brahma, as the individual soul, versus Ananda Brahma, which is the supreme Brahman, which is the supreme personality of Godhead in the super soul form. So let us talk about the first particular point. Krishna mentions that by knowing this specific object of knowledge, namely the soul and the super soul, we will taste the nectar of eternality. Yat jnatva amruta ashnute. We will experience, we will relish that nectar of eternality, immortality. So, in plain English, can anyone explain to me with any example for easier understanding? How can a person, how would a person's life change by having this knowledge of the eternality of soul and our association, eternal association with the super soul? So how can the knowledge of soul and super soul bring a difference in the life of a conditioned soul, conditioned living entity? Anyone maybe give a thought for a minute and then answer this. How the outlook would change of a person who knows about the eternality of the soul and the super soul.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yeah, so maybe take a
Can I?
minute. Yes, Anvay, I'll ask you. So just let all devotees have a minute to think over it so that everybody is ready. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right. Yes, Anvaya Mataji, how would a person's outlook change? What would be the change?
Yeah, first thing, his false ego will be destroyed. You know, he will know his actual constitutional position as being the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord.
Okay, very
Then,
nice.
secondly, with the knowledge that he is eternal, he will transcend all the dualities, lamentation, happiness, you know, everything. He will go beyond the dualities, which, you know, constantly disturb a living entity. And thus, being beyond the dualities, he'll be fixed in devotional service.
Okay, very nice. Thank you, Anvaya Mataji. Any other devotees have any thoughts to share on this? What would change in a person if we understand that we are eternal soul, part and parcel of Krishna, who is also residing with us eternally as our companion, as the super soul? What would change, Nikhil Prabhu?
Prabhu, I was in Vrindavan recently, and
Mhm.
in ISKCON, Mangal Aarti, After that, I could associate with Krishna Kumar Das ji. He was giving a class on japa. He said very wonderful things, which I remember the few things that he said. He said there are relationships are only strengthened by services.
Yeah.
Father and the child, mother and the child, husband, wife. So it's a relationship is strengthened only by the service. Once you identify yourself as a body, then you give service to the originator of the body, that is your parents. But then you also understand there is a soul and there is the originator of the soul, Jivatma, Paramatma. And then when you realize that you are not the body, that is perishing, and you are the eternal, and then you understand the originator of that soul is Paramatma, then you start serving the Paramatma.
Very nice. So all of you have given a very wonderful answer that a person will go beyond the world of dualities and he would focus on his eternal service to the Supreme Father, Lord Krishna. So, of course, these are the stages of perfection, but immediately what would also happen is that we would focus our attention on those things in our life which are also of similar nature, that means which are of eternity, and we would give less focus and attention on those disturbances, those things which constantly irritate us or bother us, which are not eternal, which are temporary. Like I often give example, say for example, and this is quite easy to relate for those of us who for our studies we needed to leave home of our parents and we stayed away from the parents during our graduation. Say a student is doing his graduation at a faraway place, say 8-10 hours away from parents, and then there comes a very special occasion, say for example Diwali. And during our times when I was doing graduation, and even now for that matter, during Diwali and all, the public transportation is so packed, the travels and everything, that it is very difficult to get either the confirmed ticket or the seat, reserved seat. So what happens? This student is traveling from his place of education to parents, and it is a overnight journey, and he gets a seat to sit which is not very comfortable. For example, it is broken somewhere and he is having to adjust. What do you think will be the consciousness of that student while traveling? Will he feel too much of a discomfort while traveling? What would be the
No,
usual? No, he won't feel. Why? What would be the reason?
because he's meeting his parents.
Yes, because the eagerness of seeing the parents after so long, say after a semester of 6 months, would be so much that those minor inconveniences won't even cross the student's mind. Like I have personally experienced when I was a student. Now I feel it very shocked that we did the journeys of almost 8-10 hours even standing and not really feeling the discomfort or tiredness because of that anticipation of meeting our near and dear ones. So similarly, in the form of the eternal soul, when we come to know of this existence of ours as the eternal part and parcel of the Lord, and understand how we are in a foreign land, we are in a foreign setup where we have left our eternal father and eternal mother in the spiritual world and have come to this material world where life after life, we are taking a new set of parents, we are taking a new set of father and mother, then we will understand that shouldn't I be putting my efforts into something which would fetch me eternal results, which would help me reach my eternal parents at the end of this life. And whatever inconveniences are there in this world, say for example, the spouse is sometimes not so cooperative, not so supportive, or we have got so many other difficulties, say, for example, related to the outside society and all that. We will consider their relationship to eternity. We will always compare it to the journey of eternity, that just like that bus journey that I mentioned, the inconveniences with respect to the seat being broken, cushion not being good and all, they will all fade off when I think about the anticipation of meeting the parents. Similarly, when our focus is in terms of attaining that eternal goal of reaching our eternal Father who is waiting for us like forever, then we won't consider the temporary inconveniences in this material world. We will just consider them as the pass by, as the temporary thing, and we won't be too much bothered about it. If somebody tells me that, Prabhu, you are traveling by this bus, but why don't you sit in this other bus, which is very comfortable and all, but thing is, it will take probably 3-4 days to reach your destination. I will say, come on, I don't mind going standing, but I want to reach quickly and be at my destination. Similarly, we also, as the practitioner, as the Bhakti Yoga practitioner, we will become immune to an extent in dealing with the temporary uncertainties, temporary nature. And like the Mataji mentioned, Anvaya Mataji mentioned, we will learn to deal with the dualities of this world in terms of honor, dishonor, happiness, distress, like a sinusoidal wave. So in maths, in our science, we as students used to learn about the sinusoidal wave. So what is the sinusoidal wave? It has a upper curve, what is called as crest, and it has a lower curve, what is called as a trough. So this material world also behaves in a sinusoidal wave, that after each happy situation, we will have a distressing situation, and each distressing situation in a way will be followed by the so-called happiness for a temporary period of time. So we would be like shock absorbers. If the shock absorbers of a vehicle are good, then we won't feel the bumps too much, right? Bumps on the road, we will have a smooth ride. So similarly, if we know this concept of eternality of the soul and the super soul, we would also ride over this sinusoidal wave and will not be much impacted. This is the effect, and this is what Lord Krishna mentions. Yat nyatva amrutam ashnute. We will experience the nectar of immortality, the nectar of amruta, immortality, eternality, if we understand this relationship between us as the eternal soul, as the part and parcel of Supreme Whole, Lord Krishna. Any questions, comments, Prabhuji's, Mataji's, on why this knowledge of the object of knowledge, Jneyam, why it is important before we proceed? Let me see everyone. Sudarshan Prabhu, Diti Mataji, Ambika Mataji, Shiva Prabhu. Anyone has any question on this particular concept?
No, Prabhuji.
No, Prabhu.
Okay, all right. So let us proceed.
When I was trying to understand this Gneyam part while reading the puppet, it was I was like, not that much. I didn't understand it well, but when the way you explained it, a very beautiful analogy, Prabhuji, and very nice. And we cannot take this off our mind. I mean, it's very relatable. And yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. So this example of anticipation of meeting parents, I have personally experienced in my whole life, in my own life as a student. So it is very easier to relate to even for me. It used to happen literally like standing and traveling for 8-10 hours. And now I feel how it happened just because of anticipation of meeting them. So let's recite the next verse. Text 14. Please try to repeat. सर्वतः पाणिपादं तत्
सर्वतः
पाणिपादं तत्
सर्वतोक्षिशिरोमुखम्
शिरोमुखम्
सर्वतः श्रुतिमल्लोके
सर्वतः
श्रुतिमल्लोके
सर्वम् आवृत्य तिष्ठति.
सर्वम्
आवृत्य तिष्ठति.
Anyone would like to read through the translation and purports? Prabhuji's, Mataji's.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So Sudarshan Prabhu, you can read the next one. Nikhil Prabhu, you can read this one. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Translation: everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads and faces, and he has ears everywhere. In this way, the super soul exists, pervading everything. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. As the sun exists diffusing its unlimited rays, so does the super soul or supreme personality of Godhead. He exists in his all-pervading form, and in him exist all the individual learning entities, beginning from the first great teacher, Brahma, down to the small ants. There are unlimited heads, legs, hands, and eyes, and unlimited living entities. All are existing in and on the super soul. Therefore, the super soul is all pervading. The individual soul, however, cannot say that he has his hands, legs, and eyes everywhere. That is not possible. If he thinks that under ignorance he is not conscious that his hands and legs are diffused all over, but when he attains to proper knowledge, he will come to that stage. His thinking is contradictory. This means that the individual soul, having become conditioned by material nature, is not supreme. The supreme is different from the individual soul. The Supreme Lord can extend his hand without limit. The individual soul cannot. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that if anyone offers him a flower or a fruit or a little water, he accepts it. If the Lord is far distance away, how can he accept things? This is the omnipotence of the Lord. Even though he is situated in his own abode, far, far away from the earth, he can extend his hand to accept what anyone offers. That is his potency. In the Brahma Samhita 5.37, it is stated, Goloka eva nivaste akhilatma bhutaha. Although he is always engaged in pastimes in his transcendental planet, he is all pervading. The individual soul cannot claim that he is all pervading. Therefore, this verse describes the super soul, the personality of Godhead, not the individual soul.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, while understanding Jnayam, the object of knowledge, in the last verse, we talked about soul as the first object of knowledge. And now, starting this verse for the next 3-4 verses, Lord Krishna talks about the characteristics of the supreme object of knowledge, which is the localized form of Lord Krishna, the Paramatma form, super soul. So, how do we understand the all pervasive nature of the super soul? Maybe we'll see with the help of some of the referral verses, references from other scriptures, and few examples. So, there comes a very important verse as part of the Brahma Samhita, which, as the name suggests, these are the prayers by Lord Brahma establishing the position of Lord Krishna. So there are total 40 verses, and this Brahma Samhita, it is only one particular part of chapter number 5 of Brahma Samhita, which was discovered by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was on the South India tour. So, if I am not wrong, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu found this particular text of Brahma Samhita in the Adikeshav temple and then brought it back, handed over to the devotees. So, in one of these texts, it is mentioned, Ekopi asau rachaitum jagadanda yat shaktir asti jadadanda jaya yadanta अंडान्तरस्थपरमानुचयातरस्थं Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. So in this particular verse, one line is very important. Andantarastha Paramanu Chayatarastham. Here, Anda, it means the super soul. So Krishna in the form of, Anda means the Anu. Krishna in the form of super soul is residing in each and every atom within the matter. And not only he is residing within each and every atom, he is also residing as super soul in Chaya Antarastharastham. Sorry, Chaya Antarastham. That means in between the two atoms, whatever is the space, Krishna is also residing as super soul in that specific space between the two atoms as well. That means, say for example, this is the water bottle and this is made up of metal. So each and every particle of this bottle, and within each of every particle, there are unlimited number of atoms. Not really unlimited, but because we are not able to count them. But scriptures explain that within each and every one of these atoms, even in this material object like bottle, Krishna is present in each one of those atoms and in between the two atoms. That way, Krishna is situated each and every place. Like last time we discussed about how many souls are there in our body. And we discussed that our own soul, we ourselves, is the primary resident along with the super soul, the Paramatma, and along with it, innumerable numbers of microbes are also living within our body. And each of those microorganisms, they also have got their super soul within us. So, practically speaking, souls and super souls both. Practically speaking, there are innumerable souls residing in terms of different microbes and different atoms that are existing within our body. Those atoms have also got super soul within it. Thus, coming back to this specific verse, Lord Krishna, in the form of super soul, in the form of Paramatma, he is all pervading. All pervading means he is spread everywhere. So you take any living entity, you take any material object, anything around us, either living or non-living, Krishna is definitely present based on these references to the verses that we can see, either Bhagavad Gita verse or Brahma Samhita verse as well. And we will see some of the examples how Krishna is all pervasive, always present, maybe in one or two verses. One example maybe we can cover now. When Krishna was residing in Dwaraka, I don't know whether you have heard this story. It also comes in Krishna book. It comes in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and also comes in Krishna book. So when Krishna was residing in Dwaraka, he had how many wives?
16,108.
16,108.
Yes, 16,108. And Bhagavatam talks about very peculiar nature of Lord Krishna that only he can exhibit. That at the end of every day, when Krishna used to retire from the Sudharma assembly, the assembly of the Yadus, after retiring for the day, Krishna used to expand himself in 16,108 different Krishnas and would enter into each of these palaces, and he used to have one-on-one personal separate interaction with all the 16,108 queens. It was not like the Srila Prabhupada gives the example, like some of the yogis have this ability to expand into many different forms, say not too many, but say 8, 10, whatever around that. But even the restriction with these 8, 10 expanded forms of the yogis is that they need to do, all the 8 forms need to do the same activity. It cannot happen that one particular form is acting in one particular manner at a given point in time, while the other expanded form of the yogi can act in different manner. That cannot happen. But in case of Krishna, not what to speak of 8 or 10, he could expand himself into 16,108 forms, and each form acting independently, separately from each other. And it so happened that Bhagavatam describes one specific day Narada Muni decided to pay visit to Lord Krishna in Dwaraka in his palace. And first Narada Muni went to one particular palace, say for example the palace of the principal queen of Lord Krishna, Queen Rukmini Devi. And he saw Krishna was say for example, discussing with Rukmini Devi on something. Then he went to the different palace, say of Satyabhama, and Narad Muni saw Krishna performing totally different activity. In one palace, he saw Krishna playing chess with his queen. In different palace, he saw Krishna having different interaction. And one peculiar thing about Krishna was that although Narad Muni was visiting different palaces, Krishna in that particular palace would receive Narad Muni as if he was seeing Narad Muni for the first time on that particular day. So he was offering a grand welcome to Narada Muni. And when Narad Muni would visit different palace, Krishna was engaged in doing a different activity. And Krishna would again welcome Narada Muni in such a way as if he had not met him throughout the day. He is meeting him first time and he would welcome him like that. And Narad Muni was completely mesmerized seeing this ability of Krishna to be present in so many different forms and to be performing different activities. So, this way, this is one example from the scriptures in which we can understand how Krishna is all pervading. He is totally, completely independent to perform whole set of activities at any given point in time at n number of different places. So, coming back to this specific verse from the 13th chapter, the Paramatma, the super soul, is all pervading through the localized form within each and every living entity, within each and every atom, and in between the two atoms. So these are all the places in which Paramatma is existing everywhere within the universal setup. So anyone has any question, comment, query, doubt to understand this particular aspect of Paramatma expanding everywhere? Hare Krishna. And this is basically also the meaning, what it means when scriptures say that his eyes, hands, legs, head, faces, ears are spread everywhere. That means he is spread itself in the localized form everywhere. So the statement looks bit technical, but when we understand it with the nitty-gritties of how Krishna is really present everywhere and with some examples from the scriptures, then it is easier to understand. It doesn't remain theoretical any further. Kirti Mataji, Anvaya Mataji, Nikhil Prabhu, Sudarshan Prabhu, any question, query on this? Is it clear how Krishna is present everywhere? Diti Mataji?
Yes,
Clear, Prabhuji.
Prabhuji.
Yes.
All right. Feel free. Some of these points may seem bit technical. Feel free to ask it and we can revisit second time, third time, not an issue. So let us proceed. So from text 14 onwards, different different characteristics of Paramatma are mentioned. Different qualities of Paramatma. So let us go to the verse, next verse. Yes. Please try to repeat. Sarvendriya Gunabhasam
Sarvendriya
Sarvendriya
Gunabhasam
Sarvendriya Vivarjitam
Sarvendriya
Sarvendriya
Vivarjitam
Vivarjitam
Asaktam Sarvabhruchaiva
Asaktam
Asaktam
Sarvabhruchaiva
Sarvabhruchaiva
Nirgunam Gunabhoktrucha.
Nirgunam
Gunam
Gunabhoktrucha.
Gunabhoktrucha.
Sudarshan Prabhu, please unmute. You can read through the translation purport.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you. Sri Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: the super soul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of material nature. Purport: the Supreme Lord, although the source of all the senses of the living entities, does not have material senses like they have. Actually, the individual souls have a spiritual senses, but in conditioned life, they are covered with the material elements, and therefore the sense activities are exhibited through matter. The Supreme Lord's senses are not so covered. His senses are transcendental and are therefore called Nirguna. Guna means the material modes, but his senses are without material covering. It should be understood that his senses are not exactly like ours, although he is the source of all our sensory activities. He has his transcendental senses which are uncontaminated. This is very nicely explained in the Svetaswara Upanishad 3.19 in the verse Apanipado Javano Grihita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has no hands which are materially contaminated, but he has hands and accept whatever sacrifice is offered to him. That is the distinction between the conditioned soul and the super soul. He has no material eyes, but he has eyes. Otherwise, how could he see? He sees everything past, present, and future. He lives within the heart of the living being, and he knows what we have done in the past, what we are doing now, and what is awaiting us in the future. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. He knows everything, but no one knows him. It is said that the Supreme Lord has no legs like us, but he can travel throughout space because he has spiritual legs. In other words, the Lord is not impersonal. He has his eyes, legs, hands, and everything else. And because we are part and parcel of a Supreme Lord, we also have these things, but his hands, legs, eyes, and senses are not contaminated by material nature. Bhagavad Gita also confirms that when the Lord appears, he appears as he is by his internal potency. He is not contaminated by the material energy because he is the Lord of material energy. In the Vedic literature, we find that his whole embodiment is spiritual. He has his eternal form called Satchidananda Vigraha. He is full of all appliance. He is the proprietor of all wealth and the owner of all energy. He is the most intelligent and is full of knowledge. These are of all. These are some of the symptoms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the maintainer of all living entities and witnesses of all activities. As far as we can understand from Vedic literature, the Supreme Lord is always transcendental. Although we do not see his heads, face, hands, or legs, he has them. And when we are elevated to the transcendental situation, we can see the Lord's form. Due to materially contaminated senses, we cannot see his form. Therefore, the impersonalists who are still materially affected cannot understand the personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. So
Thank you,
in
Prabhu.
this, Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So in this particular verse, continuing the description of the qualities of the super soul, Krishna as the super soul, it is explained that although he is the source of all senses, his senses are not like our senses. The difference between our senses in the conditioned state, we have material senses which have their own limitations. Like, say, for example, when how far we can see is dependent on how good is our eyesight, and even when we have a good eyesight we can only see up to a certain extent. But there are other living entities, say for example a hawk, for example, it can see miles up from the sky and can still see the object on the earth very, very clearly. Similarly, the sense of smell, entities like dog, cat, for example, they can smell from a very, very far away distance because their sense of smell is extremely sharp. But Krishna's sense of smell or eyesight is not like any of these material examples that we gave, including that of a hawk or any other living entity. He has got transcendental eyes, transcendental senses. And again, referring to Brahma Samhita, there is one very beautiful verse Angani yasya sakalendriya. Yes, this one. Angani yasya sakalendriya vrithimanti pashanti panti kalayanti chiram jaganti ananda chinmaya sat ujvala vigrahasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. That each and every sense of his body is able to perform the function of any other sense with that much quality, that much capability, 100% full capability. And Srila Prabhupada uses this verse to explain the concept how Krishna can accept the bhoga offering, the food which we are offering to him with love and devotion, even by just glancing at it. He doesn't have to necessarily test it the way we test in order to make the bhoga into prasadam, into his mercy. Or another example Srila Prabhupada gives, just like when Krishna in the form of Mahavishnu, in the form of Karanodakshaya Vishnu, both these titles are used interchangeably, so don't get confused. Karanodakshaya Vishnu and Mahavishnu are same. So when Mahavishnu glances at the material nature, immediately the material nature is impregnated with innumerable living entities who are supposed to take birth in the material creation. But that is not possible for any ordinary person, for any ordinary man and woman to come together for the child to be born. They would have to unite, and only then, through the scientific process, the child can be born, provided there is a sanction of Supreme Lord Krishna. But Krishna doesn't have to go through the same process to impregnate the material nature. Another example we can see that for a normal child to be born out of the body of the mother, there is a specific process that we see given in the science. But Krishna, he did not have to go through this process to take his birth as the son of Devaki and Vasudev. As the son of Devaki and Vasudev, Krishna first manifested within the heart of Vasudev, and from within the heart of Vasudev, he transformed himself within the heart of Devaki, and from the heart of Devaki, he transformed himself within the womb of Devaki. So he did not have to take his birth through the conception, how it happens in the material world. So these all examples prove that Krishna's senses, they are not like the material senses of us, the conditioned living entities. He has got transcendental senses. So Bhagavad Gita or any other scriptures for that matter, in order to describe Krishna, whenever they talk about Krishna being Nirgunam, that means he does not have any material qualities. He has got unlimited transcendental qualities. He has got no material senses. He has got all transcendental senses, the examples what we saw just now. So that is the difference between Krishna's senses and our senses. Our senses are limited, our senses are material. Krishna's senses are transcendental and have unlimited capacity. Any question, comment, Prabhuji's, Mataji's on this particular point? Is it too technical, philosophical? Hare Krishna. And coming back to us, even we, the conditioned living entity, when we qualify ourselves to go back home, back to Godhead, we would also leave behind our material senses, and we will take on with us the spiritual senses before getting the spiritual body in the spiritual world. So our senses will also be qualitatively like Krishna, but not to the same capacity. Even when we are in the spiritual world, we will be able to remember, we will be able to see, hear everything very well, but still Krishna senses carry superiority in terms of their capabilities. Nikhil Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Yes, Prabhu.
It says that the Man, Buddhi, Ahankar, they also travel.
Yes.
So they
So,
also get purified. Of course, they need to get purified before, but I just want to understand from you.
so similar to our external body, say these hands, legs, the body made up of flesh, the earth, water, fire, air, ether. When we take up the new body, the gross body we have to leave behind. But The subtle body of mind, intelligence, and false ego, it travels with us from one body to another body. Say last birth, I don't know who I was, but say if I was in a animal species or I was a human at a different place, then whatever set of mind, intelligence, and ego that I possess, that travels with me birth over birth. But when we are about to enter the spiritual world, then we leave behind our material mind, our material intelligence, and false ego, and we take a set of spiritual mind, spiritual intelligence, and true ego. So, similar to the spiritual body, we also have spiritual subtle body of mind, intelligence, and true ego that we will get before entrance into the spiritual world. Till that time, we have to manage with whatever the material set of subtle body that we have got with us. Is that all right, Nikhil Prabhu? Hare Krishna. So just that only difference between the gross body and the subtle body. With each life, the gross body is completely destroyed, but subtle body is not. Subtle body is left behind, changed when we are about to enter the spiritual world. Is that all right? Madan Mohan, Krishna Lila Prabhu, Diti Mataji, Kirti Mataji, Shiva Prabhu, Ambika Mataji. Any question, comment on this? Is it clear?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
There is some purport is like Krishna know everything what is going in the present, in the past, what is going to be happen, and future also he knows.
Yes.
But as a devotee, sometimes we think why Krishna is doing like this with us, or why we are suffering. Although we know the literature that Krishna is doing for all of us benefit, so why this is happening that we do not want to accept it as a devotee also.
So actually this question was also asked earlier this morning in Bhagavatam discussion. So one thing we discussed is whatever is coming in front of us in terms of unpalatable things or undesirable things, the difficulties in our life. One thing is for sure, like I gave the example of somebody going to a restaurant and ordering some particular dish. And when that dish comes to our table, we don't blame the waiter for bringing that particular food item or the dish. Why we don't blame? Because that dish has been ordered by us. So similarly, whatever difficulties, challenges, or whatever are difficulties are being manifested in our life, at some point or another, we have desired those things, Prabhuji. Okay? And these are just the resultant actions of our own desires or reactions of our own actions that we performed earlier based on our specific desires. This is one way to look at it, that it is us who, like I give you a simple example, like when I was a student, I had aspiration in my mind to dedicate my life in the form of a full-time brahmachari to the moment. But one another desire I also had was to experience the corporate world to an extent. And I was very afraid of not having this experience, otherwise that will cause me a blockage later on if I have the desire that why did I not attend to it. So I thought, okay, let me take up the householder life and at the same time experience it. But now, after experiencing corporate world for last around 21, 22 years, then it feels like, oh my god, it is not as cozy and as rosy as we think about. There are so many challenges in terms of politics and the career progression and the cutthroat competition and so on and so forth. But although it is very painful to deal with all of it, we don't blame Krishna. Why? Because at some point of time we had decided Krishna is simply arranging the fulfillment of those desires. This is one. Second thing, whatever test Krishna is giving in our life, he knows what is best for our spiritual advancement, especially for a devotee who is practicing devotee, taking up Krishna consciousness. Krishna himself is very peculiar. He is very certain what all he wants devotee, what all he wants to arrange in the life of such a devotee, so that with every passing day they come closer to Krishna. So if even in the worst unpalatable or the difficult situations in our life, we try to understand this one particular point. What does Krishna want me to learn out of this? Then we would be at much better placed, much better equipped to deal with the situation, rather than looking at it in a in a complaining mood why it is happening. So firstly, we have decided at some point or another. Second is, Krishna has arranged each and every situation, including the difficulties, as an opportunity for us to go closer to him, for an opportunity as an opportunity for us to grow in our own spiritual life. And if we take it that way, then it will be a fruitful journey. Otherwise, similar to the materialist, they also complain, but the result of that complaint is they get stuck in the same cycle forever. But devotees, as a devotees, we want to learn our lessons out of it and then not repeat the same mistake, go closer to Krishna. Is that
One more thing,
yeah?
Prabhu, it is like some after initiation also some devotees are thinking I have taken initiation, but why the fruitful actions is coming and like this we have a suffering. Although they know the fact that all this thing is happening on the as the purport is also telling that Krishna is doing all this, he know all this thing. But after initiation also we are thinking like that. So is there any fault in us or something like it is arrangement of Krishna?
See, the word initiation in plain English, what does it mean? What does initiation in plain English mean? It means the beginning, right? So initiation is the beginning of our surrender to the instructions of the spiritual master. So it is not right to expect that we have taken initiation, that means the laws of material nature will not act, or that means the difficulties in life will not happen. In fact, Krishna never ever promises that in anywhere in Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture. What he does promise is that even in those difficulties, if we remain loyal to Krishna's service, then he will provide us with all the necessary empowerment, knowledge, and sense of discrimination to deal with that situation, provided we remain fixed in our devotional service to him. He will equip us to deal with that situation. But it is not a realistic expectation to say that because I have taken initiation, no more difficulties or no more challenges. Never ever Krishna mentions. In fact, we see example of any exalted personality in Srimad Bhagavatam, anyone you like, Arjuna, Yudhishthir Maharaj, Prachetas, King Prachina Barhi, Lord Shiva, Brahma, Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruva Maharaj, anyone you, Narada Muni, we would not see a single one of these personalities who have not had to go through severe, difficult situations in their own life before they achieved the platform of pure devotional service. No one. So, if these examples, which are given as a beacon lights, as the lighthouses for us to refer to advance in our spiritual life, they had to go through all this. How come we can be any exceptions? Definitely, this is part and parcel of being in the material world, and better be equipped to deal with it rather than having unrealistic expectations. Okay, is that all right, Madan Mohan Krishna Lila Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you for a valuable report.
Hare Krishna. So let us proceed. Before we proceed to the next verse, are the details clear, Prabhuji's Mataji's? How Krishna's senses are transcendental? What do we mean by material senses? And what happens when we are about to enter spiritual world? We will get a transcendental set of senses, and we will also get spiritual mind, spiritual subtle body in the sense of mind, intelligence, and true ego. Hare Krishna. Let's proceed. Text 15. Text 16, sorry. Please try to repeat. Bahir-antascha bhutanam
Bahir-antascha bhutanam
acharam charam eva cha
acharam charam eva cha
sukshmatvat tat avigeyam
sukshmatva avijnayam
durastham cha antike cha tat.
durastam
Hare Krishna. Anyone would like to read through translation and purport?
Can I, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji, Diti Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Translation. The supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, the moving and the non-moving. Because he is subtle, he is beyond the power of the material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. Purport. In Vedic literature, we understand that Narayana, the Supreme Person, is residing both outside and inside of every living entity. He is present in both the spiritual and material worlds. Although he is far, far away, still he is near to us. These are, these are the statements of Vedic literature. Asino dhuram, asino, asino dhuram.
Vrajati.
Prabhuji, can you help?
Yeah.
Vrajati.
Asino duram vrajati
Dhuram.
shayano yati sarvataha.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
And because he is always engaged in transcendental bliss, we cannot understand how he is enjoying his full opulence. We cannot see or understand with these material senses. Therefore, in the Vedic language, it is said that to understand him, our material mind and senses cannot act. But one who has purified his mind and senses by practicing Krishna consciousness in devotional service can see him constantly. It is confirmed in Brahma Samhita that the devotee who has developed love for the Supreme God can see him always without cessation. And it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 11.54 that he can be seen and understood only by devotional service.
Bhaktya
Bhaktya
Tvananyaya Shaktya.
Bhaktyatva Tvananyaya Shaktya. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
So here it is explained how Lord Krishna, although he seems very far, far away, situated in the spiritual world, at the same time, he is also the closest personality who is closest to us and constantly along with us through thick and thin. So to explain this, we will give a very graphic example, which was once given by His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj. So this is a very bit graphic. So see if you like it, but for understanding this point is very important. Say, consider any one of our close friends who is very heart to heart close to us, and he has been or she has been supportive of us through thick and thin. Such a person who we always are very open and very much at ease to share our happiness, distress, every single thing. However, if we fall into a fallen condition, say for example, somebody does some ghastly activity which is not really as per the moral codes of conduct, we see that sometimes such friends also they walk away. Nobody wants to associate with a person who is fallen, and so consider that such a fallen person as a criminal. He goes into jail and everything, and the situation gets degraded to greater and greater degree subsequently. So in the material setup, we will see that even the best of the friends would turn away from a person who is degraded further and further into his or her life. But imagine the condition of Krishna as the Surut, as the heart to heart friend of ours. Even when the living entity degrades itself into the most fallen condition of life, say for example, even when a person falls down from a human form of life into an animal form, like cat, dog, or anything, or even as the tree, even as the reptile, or even further down, even if one takes birth as an insect, or even further down, even when a living entity takes his or her birth in a very abominable form, say for example as microbes, insects within the stool as well, still Even those microbes, insects, and worms also have got Paramatma in them along with them. So the point Giriraj Swami Maharaj was explaining that no, how much ever good friend he or she may be in our life would be ready to accompany us in our degraded condition of life to such an extent. But Krishna, he never ever leaves the company of the devotee and never ever backs away from his position as the instructor, as the guide of the eternal living entity at any point in time, even when the living entity falls to the most degraded condition, being that of a insect or a worm or a microbe in that particular order. Why? Because Krishna does love us in the truest sense. So here it is explained that although he is far, far away, he is also always closest to us in the form of the Paramatma. And it is explained that while we have got this material set of senses, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, so on and so forth, we cannot appreciate Krishna's presence. There is one very wonderful verse which comes in the scriptures. Ata Shri Krishna Namadi na bhaved grayam indriyai sevon mukhehi jivado swayam chaiva spurati adaha. That with our material senses, we cannot really appreciate Krishna who is having a Satchit Ananda transcendental body. If we want to appreciate Krishna, we would need to purify our senses from by the process of devotional service. And Srila Prabhupada gives the example just like a iron rod. If it is in contact with fire for a very long period of time, the iron rod it will become red hot, and it will also inherit all the qualities of the fire, such that if we touch a cloth to that red hot rod, immediately the cloth will also start burning, similar to cloth being put in fire. Why? Because that iron rod has been in close association with the fire such that it becomes as good as fire. Similarly, the living entity also, if we are regularly for a sustainable period of time are engaged in devotional service to Lord Krishna regularly, then we would also, our senses will also be become transcendental. And there are so many examples of devotees who attained transcendental body even while being in this material world because of their constant engagement in service to the Lord. Like in Maharashtra, we have the famous example of the saint Sant Tukaram, who could travel to Vaikuntha in the Vaikuntha plane within the very same body which had become transcendental because of his constant engagement. Or Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, last part of the first canto, 16th chapter, Pandavas retire timely. It is explained that Pandavas also they completely spiritualized their body because of their constant engagement in service to Lord Krishna. So the point is, we cannot appreciate the presence of the Lord with the dull material senses, which are still in a contaminated state. But if we constantly engage ourselves in the service of the Lord, like the iron rod in touch with fire, then we would also inherit the qualities of the fire. Our senses will also become transcendental, then we can experience presence of Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada writes in his writings, purports, we can experience the presence of the Lord like a person, like Nikhil Prabhu is sitting in front of me online. We can talk, we can see each other, we can appreciate each other's moment, we can reciprocate. Similar to, we can talk with Krishna, we can interact with Krishna that personally. In fact, we are still online, but we can interact with Krishna in person if we purify our senses through devotional service. So this is the difference between how Krishna senses, our senses are different, and how Krishna is very far away at the same time closest to us. So now we come to this particular verse where we also have a group activity. So after we go through the translation purport, then we go through the group activity. Anyone has any question, comments, Prabhuji's, Mataji's? Are you all still with me? Is it too philosophical, technical? All right.
No, Prabhuji, very much with you, and very beautiful explanations, Prabhuji. I mean,
Hare Krishna.
we're able to
It
connect
is
so very well. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare
We
Krishna.
are
Krishna.
relishing it, Prabhu.
Hare
Yes.
Krishna. So let's go through this verse, text 17, a very important verse. Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu
Avivaktam
Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu
vibhaktam iva cha sthitam
Vibhaktam
vibhaktam
iva
iva
cha
cha
sthitam.
sthitam
bhutabhartru cha tadneyam
bhutabhartu cha
Tajneyam
grasishnu prabhavishnu cha.
grashishnu prabhavishnu cha.
Anyone would like to read through? Hare Krishna. Nikhil Kapoor Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Translation. Although the super soul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. The Lord is situated in everyone's heart as the super soul. Does this mean that he has become divided? No. Actually, he is one. The example is given of the sun. The sun at the meridian is situated in its place. But if one goes for 5,000 miles in all directions and asks where is the sun, everyone will say that it is shining on his head. In the Vedic literature, this example is given to show that although he is undivided, he is situated as if divided. Also, it is said in Vedic literature that one Vishnu is present everywhere by his omnipotence, just as the sun appears in many places to many persons. And the Supreme Lord, although the maintainer of every living entity, devours everything at the time of annihilation. This was confirmed in the 11th chapter when the Lord said that he had come to devour all the warriors assembled at Kurukshetra. He also mentioned that in the form of time, he devours also. He is the annihilator, the killer of all. When there is creation, he develops all from original state, and at the time of annihilation, he devours them. The Vedic hymns confirm the fact that he is the origin of all living entities and the rest of all. After creation, everything rests in his omnipotence, and after annihilation, everything again returns to rest in him. These are the confirmation of the Vedic hymns. Yato va imani bhutani jayanti yena tat jayanti jivanti tat prayanti abhisham vishanti tad brahma tad vijinashasva Tirthya Upanishad 3.1.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Although the super soul appears to be divided amongst all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all. So here, Krishna's quality is given that although he is present in all living entity, that doesn't mean that because of his being expanded as the super soul in all innumerable living entities, he becomes less in any particular way. He becomes lesser of Krishna because of expanding as Paramatma in so many living entities. He still remains that much fully capable as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. How do we understand? To understand his position as the creator is easier, but how do we understand Krishna's position as the devouring factor of each and everything that exists within this material cosmic manifestation? To see this, we can see that there have been so many civilizations and there have been so many even flourishing spiritual cultures when different favorable kings were there, or when so many great empowered personalities, part and parcel of Lord Krishna, they were presenting the philosophy and culture of Krishna consciousness. For example, after the conclusion of the pastimes by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when the six principal students of the Lord in the form of 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, when they were preaching Krishna consciousness as a collaborated way, in the coordinated way, where they trained few devotees like Shamananda Prabhu, Srinivas Acharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and send them to different parts of Bengal, Orissa, and Bangladesh to preach. And the preaching movement was growing very nicely. And it is explained that Srila Rupa Goswami, he, through his influence and also through the influence of Srila Jiva Goswami on the Rajputs of Jaipur, they became so favorable that the red stone, which was typically reserved for construction of the big palaces of the Mughal kings, that same red stone was made available by those Mughal kings through the facilitation of these Rajput, who were like the commanders for those Mughal kings, for the construction of Shri Radha Govinda temple in Vrindavan. So, in short, to say that the spiritual culture was flourishing, Vaishnava movement was flourishing and spreading like anything. It was spreading in such a coordinated manner. But subsequently, with the influence of time, after the departure of the pastimes of the Goswamis, even such a flourishing spiritual culture, there was a gradual, we won't exactly call it diminishment, but a depletion of the influence and spread of that spiritual culture to a level where just 3 to 4 centuries down the line, at the time of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the 19th century, there were upper sampradayas. That means the original teachings of Goswamis, they had almost become like diminished. They had almost disappeared, and many of the upper sampradayas, the incorrect, wrong interpretations of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings, they had become very, very prominent. So this explains this particular point that is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna, in its power as the time factor, is also the devouring factor for everything, including both the material as well as spiritual. And what is the conclusion? Conclusion is that we have to constantly keep striving, and Krishna also needs to keep sending his empowered representatives to make sure that whenever there is a diminishment, there is a depletion of the spiritual culture, those empowered representatives come and revive that moment again, to for the protection of the mankind in this material world, or to check the advancement of Kali. So, like after Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Goswamis came. Then after Goswamis also, there the student Guru Shishya Parampara in the form of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Baladev Vidyabhushan, such empowered acharyas came. When it further became depleted, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur came. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur prayed to the Lord to send his representative to assist him, and he did get his own son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who is mentioned as Ray of Vishnu. And subsequently, Srila Prabhupada, whose appearance was predicted by none other than Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came to revive the spiritual culture and to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. So, point is, the nature of this world is whatever we lift, and if we leave it, it will fall off. Whatever we throw up, whatever goes up, the nature of the material world is naturally it tends to pull everything down, and that pulling factor is also, Bhagavad Gita is saying, is energy of Lord Krishna in as a all devouring time factor. So we should not be bewildered when we see sometimes things falling here and there down, and see things depleting or diminishing in certain way. That is the very nature of this world. And what is important as the devotees of the Lord is to constantly strive to play our part, to perform our duty in this Guru Shishya Parampara, to revive Krishna consciousness of as many living entities as we can. Then our vision will be perfect. Otherwise, devotees will be very idealistic that, okay, if we are chanting, if we are trying to follow Krishna consciousness, why there are so many disturbances either in our life or everywhere around? Like, just see the situation in Bangladesh. It is definitely concerning, no doubt about it. But is Krishna unaware of that? He is definitely aware. Is Krishna not anxious about it? Definitely he is anxious. So while we play our part in terms of providing material support wherever required, we should understand that Krishna is more worried, more anxious than us, and definitely he won't keep quiet. He would arrange for the empowered representatives to deal with the situation, and we need to keep playing our part. That's it. But following Krishna consciousness does not mean that there won't be difficulties, there won't be calamities in material world. The nature of the material world, as Krishna's all devouring time factor, is that things whatever go up, they will tend to get diminished as well because of the time factor. So we have to keep our expectations right. Any questions, Prabhujis, Matajis, on this particular aspect of Krishna's supreme personality? He also acts as the devouring time factor. Hare Krishna. So let's cover. I have planned for 2 more verses, and then this particular section of Deyam is concluded at text 19. So let's cover this text. Please try to repeat. Jyotisham api tadni Jyotisham api tad Jyotish
Jyotisham
Jyotisham
Api
apita
Jyotish
Tamasah param uchyate
Tamasa
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 param
param
uchyate
uchyate
Parachyate
Jnanam Jneyam Jnanagamyam
Gnadam
Jnanam
Jnanam
Jneyam
Jneyam
Jnanagamyam
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 Hृदि सर्वस्य विष्ठितम्
Hridi
Hridi
Sarvasya
Sarvasya
Vishtitam.
Sarvasya
Vrishtitam.
Vishtitam.
Anyone would like to read through translation purport? Prabhuji's, Mataji's. Hare Krishna.
May I read, Prabhuji?
Kirti Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. Purport. The Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the source of light in all luminous objects like the sun, moon, and stars. In the Vedic literature, we find that in the spiritual kingdom, there is no need of sun or moon because the effulgence of the Supreme Lord is there. In the material world, that Brahma Jyotir, the Lord's spiritual effulgence, is covered by the Mahat Tattva, the material elements. Therefore, in this material world, we require the assistance of sun, moon, electricity, etc. for light. But in the spiritual world, there is no need of such things. It is clearly stated in the Vedic literature that because of his luminous effulgence, everything is illuminated. It is clear, therefore, that his situation is confirmed in the Vedic literature. Aditya Varnam Tamasa
One
Prastab
line, one line is missed, Mataji. His situation
is not in the material world. Sorry, Prabhuji.
Okay.
He is situated in the spiritual world, which is far, far away in the spiritual sky. That is also confirmed in the Vedic literature. Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat. Shvetashvara Upanishad 3.8. He is just like the sun, eternally luminous, but is far, far beyond the darkness of this material world. His knowledge is transcendental. The Vedic literature confirms that Brahman is concentrated transcendental knowledge. To one who is anxious to be transferred to that spiritual world, knowledge is given by the Supreme Lord who is situated in everyone's heart. One Vedic mantra, Shvetashvara Upanishad 6.18, says, Tam ha devam atma buddhi prakasham mumukshur vai sharanam aham prapadye. One must surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead if he at all wants liberation. As far as the goal of ultimate knowledge is concerned, it is also confirmed in Vedic literature. Tam eva viditvati mrutyum eti. Only by knowing him can one surpass the boundary of birth and death. Shvetashvara Upanishad 3.8. He is situated in everyone's heart as the supreme controller. The supreme has legs and hands distributed everywhere, and this cannot be said of the individual soul. Therefore, that there are two knowers of the field of activity, the individual soul and the super soul, must be admitted. One's hands and legs are distributed locally, but Krishna's hands and legs are distributed everywhere. This is confirmed in the Shvetashvara Upanishad 3.17. Sarvasya Prabhum Ishanam Sarvasya Sharanam Brihat. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, Supersoul, is the Prabhu or Master of all living entities. Therefore, he is the ultimate shelter of all living entities. So, there is no denying the fact that the Supreme Supersoul and the individual soul are always different. Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you, Mataji. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. He is the source of light in all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge. He is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. So here, Krishna's form as Paramatma, one of the quality is being mentioned as Krishna is the source of light in all luminous objects. So one thing which would surprise us if we carefully contemplate on this particular point, that this material world by default, it is filled with darkness. It is no light at all. But you might say that, Prabhu, just look outside the window. It is all bright and shiny and all light there. But scripture, specifically Bhagavad Gita, explains that these luminous objects, including the sun, the moon, and the electric bulb, for example, they all reflect the light which is ultimately coming from Lord Krishna in the form of Brahma Jyoti, in the form of the effulgent light emanating from the transcendental body of the Lord. And as soon as these objects are taken away, say for example, when it is night, when the sun is no more present, and when it is dark night, when moon is also not present, and if we switch off the light, then in the absence of sun, moon, electric bulb, and the stars in the sky, when they are also not present, then it is completely dark. And scriptures explain that our vision is as good as useless, human vision specifically. Why? Because the world is in its natural state, which is darkness, this material world, not the spiritual world. The material world is in its natural state of darkness. Our vision, which is limited, why it is limited? Because it is dependent on darkness for us to see the objects. It is also no good because the support of the brightness is not there, so we can't see any object as such. Whereas the spiritual world and the spiritual vision is not mentioned like that. Spiritual world by its very nature is bright and effulgent. And 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions that natadbhasayate suryo na shashanko na pavakah yadgatva na nivartante tadhama paramam mama. That Krishna doesn't need the help of the Surya, the sun, or the moon, or pavakaha. Pavakaha means Agni, the fire. He doesn't need help of all these entities to illuminate the spiritual world. It is already bright and effulgent. But material world on the other side is completely opposite. It is dark. It needs, just like in the evening we need electric bulb or tube light to illuminate our home. Similarly, Krishna has arranged for transcendental bulb or tube light in the form of the sun and the moon, and it is he who is providing that light through the sun and moon by the sun and the moon reflecting the light coming from Brahma Jyoti, his bodily effulgence. So this is also a characteristic of Lord Krishna. So this is the another description of the qualities of Krishna as the Paramatma. And wherever this word is coming, Brahman, yes, this one. This is Brahman. If it is Brahman, then A needs to have a line on top of it. So it is Brahman, which means it means different thing. It means the light emanating from Lord Krishna, or it also means Brahman means everything that is transcendental. Sometimes this word is used to refer to soul as well, which is part and parcel of Krishna. And Supreme Brahman means Paramatma. It means the super soul. Hare Krishna. Any question, comment? If not, we come to the last verse for this Deyam part. So now Krishna explains who, which particular personality with characteristics A, B, C can understand all what Krishna has described so far in terms of Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnana, and Deyam. Whatever Krishna has explained, who can understand it? Krishna explains here. So let's go through the verse. Please try to repeat. Iti kshetram tatha jnanam
Iti
Kshetram
kshetram
tata
tatha
jnanam
ज्ञेयं चोक्तं समासतः
ज्ञेयं चोक्तं
samasatah.
समासतः
मद्भक्ता एतत् अविज्ञाय
Madbhakta
मद्भक्त्या
etvavijnaya
एत्ववज्ञाय
मद्भक्ता एतत् विज्ञाय
Madbhakta
मद्भक्त्या
etvavijnaya
एत्वविज्ञाय
मद्भावायोपपद्यते
bhavayopapadyate.
मद्भावायोपपद्यते
Hare Krishna. Nikhil Prabhu, you want to read through last two?
Sure.
Hare Krishna.
Translation. Thus, the field of activities, the body, knowledge, and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. The Lord had described in summary the body, the knowledge, and the knowable. This knowledge is of three things: the knower, the knowable, and the process of knowing. Combined, these are called Vigyan, or the science of knowledge. Perfect knowledge can be understood by the unalloyed devotees of the Lord directly. Others are unable to understand. The monists say that at the ultimate stage, these three items become one, but the devotees do not accept this. Knowledge and development of knowledge mean understanding oneself in Krishna consciousness. We are being led by material consciousness. But as soon as we transfer all consciousness to Krishna's activities and realize that Krishna is everything, then we attain real knowledge. In other words, knowledge is nothing but the preliminary stage of understanding devotional service perfectly. In the 15th chapter, this will be clearly explained. Now, to summarize, one may understand that verses 6 and 7, beginning from Mahabhutani and continuing through Chaitanya Dhrita, analyze the material elements and certain manifestations of the symptoms of life. These combine to form the body or the field of activities. The verses 8 to 12 from Amanitvam through Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam describe the process of knowledge for understanding both types of knower of the field of activities, namely the soul and the super soul. Then verses 13 through 18, beginning from Anadi Matparam and continuing through Hridi Sarvasya Visthitam, describe the soul and the super soul or the super soul. Describe the soul and the Supreme Lord or the super soul. Thus, three items have been described: the field of activity, the body; the process of understanding, both the soul and the super soul. It is especially described here that only the unalloyed devotees of the Lord can understand these three items clearly. So for these devotees, Bhagavad Gita is fully useful. It is they who can attain the supreme goal, the nature of the Supreme Lord Krishna. In other words, only devotees and not others can understand Bhagavad Gita and derive the desired result.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So here it is explained, like Krishna is basically summarizing whatever he has covered so far in this particular chapter. So he has covered the knowledge about Kshetra, the body, knowledge, which is jnanam, and knowable, what is the object of knowledge. They have been described summarily by Krishna, and he is explaining the qualification of the person to be able to understand it thoroughly, that the person should be engaged in devotional service. In fact, not just devotional service, Krishna is saying unalloyed devotional service. At least he should be striving for unalloyed devotional service. Then we will be able to understand this concept of how the body has been arranged, designed by the Lord, how it has been arranged as the field of activity, how the soul considers itself as the enjoyer and thus performs his action within that field of activity, and how super soul is different from the soul in its capacity as the supreme knower, of all fields of activities. And in terms of understanding the object of knowledge, today we saw what is the importance of understanding the eternality of the soul and its eternal position in relationship as the part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, as the part and parcel of Lord Krishna. And we also discussed about various characteristics of the Super Soul in terms of how, although it is very, very far, at the same time it is very near, how the Supreme Lord has also got his senses, but they are different in terms of nature as well as in terms of their capacity compared to our material senses. And how this Supreme Lord is always the well wishing friend of all living entities, even when we fall down to the most degraded condition of life. This Super Soul or Paramatma never ever leaves our company, never ever leaves his guidance for us. It is always available for us to take. And with this, we conclude one particular section of this chapter 13 about the object of knowledge. And there is one group activity, but considering the example of Krishna in Dwaraka that we discussed earlier, probably you would need some time to think about this. So maybe we take this as the homework, and next time, whenever the discussion begins, then we start with this. So even if Prema Kishori Mataji is conducting the session, we can relay the home assignment to her and we can start with this discussion. So let me put it in the chat. Where did the chat go? Kirti Mataji, where is that? Oh, yes, here. So we can consider some examples from Srila Prabhupada's book about how Lord Krishna can be understood based on this example of sun that Srila Prabhupada gives to explain the position of Paramatma. That sun, even if we go to north, south, east, west, even 5,000 miles, Srila Prabhupada writes, still we see that the sun is still upon our head. Similarly, even if Krishna is spread in the localized form across millions and billions of the living entities, still he remains the complete whole available everywhere. So can we discuss few examples? Like one example which I had thought of, but we covered it earlier, which was Krishna acting in different ways simultaneously within the palaces of 16,108 queens. And Narada Muni observing that, can we think of any other examples? Okay, so take it as the home assignment and we again regroup and meet. Any other question, comments, Prabhuji's, Mataji's? Hare Krishna. Was the session very heavy? Everyone is still okay? Not sleepy? Hare Krishna.
Very nice session, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your kind encouragement. Okay, and continue to, if we are, see, you will see as we proceed in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna ultimately mentions in the 18th chapter that trying to understand Krishna, trying to put efforts to understand Krishna and understand all these concepts that Krishna is teaching, the Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnanam, Gneyam, all these concepts is also a part of rendering devotional service to Krishna by using our intelligence. So even if some of these concepts we do find bit technical, sometimes bit boring, or sometimes bit sleepy to go through, we should do it as a service to Lord Krishna. Because Krishna says, whoever understands this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is serving me by his or her intelligence. So definitely we should try to put our best efforts possible. Hare Krishna. Anyone has any question? If not, then we conclude. Kirti Mataji, do we have any announcements?
Krishna Prabhuji, as of now, nothing Prabhuji, but very, very grateful for your session. Very thankful Prabhuji. And,
thank you for all of your inspiring association. And wherever, yes, Nikhil Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
We have one big announcement here, since I just wanted to share. We are in Halifax in Canada, in the Eastern Shore.
Oh.
And before leaving for India trip, I identified one property for the temple, the church. And then this offer has been accepted.
Jai Hari Bol.
Jai Hari Bol. And
Very
now
nice.
we are on the fund collection drive. So we will be starting that drive very soon. Yesterday we had our meeting regarding that. We'll be doing our all the drive here within Canada, within Halifax, and our Bhakti Mark Swami Maharaj, he's also coming next week. So that will be in Atlantic Canada and the Eastern Shore. We